Hi, this is Ramesh. It's again the time of elections, and the whole lot of parties who are contesting the elections today. They are talking about the freebies and rave and welfare schemes and many such kind of things, right? I had a slightly different perception about it, and I thought I'll just share that. And I wanted to compare and contrast between a corporate which is running a business versus a party which is running a government. Okay, so how closely related both of them are, and let's try and understand both of them in their own silos. So first we'll talk about the corporate which is running a business. A corporate, or it can be an MSME, or it can be anything. I mean, any entity which is running a business, right? So what exactly do they do? So they first try to identify what is a demand which is available in the markets for a certain product or a certain service or whatever it may be, which this particular entity has got some kind of a it has got that skills and the put and the and it can get into that business, and then it thinks that it will be able to deliver. So having identified a particular market segment which is actually catering to a certain product or a certain service or a product line and whatever, it basically starts the functioning of the business. And what exactly do they do? Multiple things. Like one is in terms of it needs the resources. Now resources can be in terms of the factories, in terms of machineries, in terms of equipments and all those things, and also in terms of the human resources, because they need to convert or whatever they need to manufacture something that actually which can be given to the customers. And then there will be some funding resources which will be required. So the monetary resources which they try to kind of tap into the financial institutions to get some debts, for which they have to pay the interest year on year. Or they also try and look for like-minded parties, like-minded shareholders who try to become kind of parties into their businesses, and for whom they can actually give a portion of their profits and the dividends, etc. Right? So having identified all these things, then they start running the business, and when they run the business, they actually manufacture whatever product which has to be this thing. And they also, when they initially identify which business to get into, they also try and quickly find out whether actually is it a blue ocean or a red ocean, in the sense that actually are there too many competitors in the market space, and how will they be able to also cater to the market share, and is the market share very big enough, the pie is big enough for everybody to jump in, and then will they also be able to get their kind of share in the this thing or not. So they try to identify all these kind of things, and they get in, and then once they start doing it, then they actually kind of pick up the raw materials and whatever from the suppliers, and then they convert that into a finished product, and then which is again given to the customers. The kind of like identified customer segment, market segment, that which they are looking for. So it could be the middle class, it could be the upper class, it could be the lower class, it could be the students, it could be the men, women, whatever, right? I mean, it has to be some kind of a specific this thing, or it can be cutting across all the customer segments that they may be having products which they cater to. So depending upon whatever it is, then they try to run the business, and they try to raise revenues, and then the revenues are the top line, and then the revenues once it comes in, and then that finally gives you the bottom line, which is the profits after removing the operation expenditure whatever they have incurred in running the business. And out of the profit, they basically pay for the debts that which they have raised from the financial institutions. They pay the interest, and then they have the depreciation, and finally they have to pay the taxes based upon the taxation policy. The remaining whatever is left over is called as a profit after tax, which is the bottom line. Now that bottom line is something that actually which they try to look at, is it has to be something which has to be growing quarter on quarter, because the revenue growth quarter on quarter, year on year, is one part of it, but then the profits also will have to grow, because if the profits doesn't grow as in the same proportion or increased proportion as the revenues, then there is something wrong in their business. This thing, they have to identify all those kind of things and work on that. So ultimately their goal would be that how the profitability of the company is, right? That is what is the main, financially they look at it in that particular way. Now after that, once they achieve that particular thing, and when they have a sustainability, when the business is sustaining itself, it is able to have a break even. So the operational break even and business break even, and when it is able to run very well, then in that case, then it starts then looking into how do we provide employee satisfaction, how do we provide the best of abilities, best of amenities to the employees, to for them to have a happy hunting ground in the business, in the company, and also to have some CSR initiatives to giving back to the society, and then also in terms of how to kind of come up with a balanced scorecard approach, where actually they try to look at all the four different quadrants of the financial quadrant, and then the customer quadrant, and then the employee quadrant, and also their quality quadrant, in terms of how they are doing, right? So then they try to provide, the employees also try to like if they will stick to the company, they will work over there if they are able to get some good salary, number one. And number two is if the climate, the company climate, the company culture, the company policies are conducive enough, and they like the place where they can work, they have a very transparent and easy working culture that they have. So that is what actually makes the employees to continue working in the organization, and then to provide the best of their service to the company, so that actually the company prospers, and they also in turn prosper because of the company, right? So this is exactly what they try to look for. Now, when we try to compare this with a party which is running a government, okay, so what are the difference? So there are most of the things whatever we spoke about in terms of business, all of those things also exist in the in a government, which is like when a party which is running a government, right? So in this particular space, there is citizens actually who actually develop as the employees as well as the customers, because the party, the government will have to cater to the customers. It has to be a customer's delight. It has to it has to help the customers. It has to ensure that the customers are very happy, they're lively, their lifestyle is improving year on year. They're in terms of the medical facilities, in terms of the academic facilities, in terms of the other infrastructural these things. There are so many other factors actually which they try to provide, so that the all the employees, all the citizens of the country, they are able to prosper, and they have money in their hands, and then they have disposable income available, and then where they have spending potential basically. So, and they are able to spend, and they are able to run the economy, they are able to spin the economy's wheel, okay? So as George Bush had said at some point of time, that for any government, it is the economy is stupid, is what he had said. So which is very true. So if the government has to focus upon the primary focus, like how a business is focusing upon the revenues and the bottom line, the profits. So yeah, the country has to focus upon the economy and the GDP. These two are the primary indicators. I mean, if the economy is booming, the economy is doing very well. So the reason why the economy is doing very well is because all the participants of the economy, in terms of the corporates, in terms of MSMEs, in terms of the startups, in terms of the citizens, in terms of the foreign direct investors, the foreign institutional investors, in terms of the capital markets, everything is doing well. So that is the only reason why the economy is doing well. The GDP is doing very well. And the GDP, what is the GDP? That is basically the produce that every year produce. And if the GDP is going up quarter on quarter, year on year, if it is going up, then it means that you're producing more. And the reason you're producing more is because you have an inclusive I mean, you have a domestic kind of requirement. The domestic requirement is increasing year on year, and you also have, you are catering to the other countries, and where you are actually exporting. So which means you are having a lot of export orders which comes into you, and then you are actually manufacturing a lot of things. A lot of goods and services are being shipped across over to different countries, and then you are catering. So that is basically helping you to drive your GDP, and and also it is bringing in the forex. It is bringing in more and more forex reserves, which actually helps your the country also. Because let's understand that most of the countries today, it is not backing its local currency on the gold, it is all being backed on the greenbacks. So if it is a greenback, meaning it's on the dollar, this thing. And so all the countries that actually, when if they have to be one of those emerging economy kind of a thing, then it has to have a lot of forex reserves, so that actually it will be able to kind of like it's the current account deficit will be in a kind of decent this thing. And also it will ensure that the it has got enough money to provide for the import bills, right? So typically about 9 months to 12 months of the import bill should be able to should be taken care by your forex reserves. So if you are having something floating of that order, then that is actually a good this thing. Now the second thing is that in terms of the debt, so the sovereign rating actually is dependent upon the debt of the country. And no foreign investors or no this thing people actually, when even the domestic investors also, they are not so very attracted to giving funds to the government in case if the sovereign rating is not doing well. Okay, so the debt to GDP ratio basically is one of the driving factors which actually denotes whether the sovereign rating is in good hands or not. So roughly about 50%, 60%, if the debt to GDP ratio, if it is, then it is relatively in a good shape. The tipping point is somewhere about 70, 75%, and if you go beyond that, then you are getting into the kind of bad, the bad portions of this thing. And then after some time, you will definitely get into, the country will slip into an kind of economic crisis or sovereign rating crisis, correct? So that is something that which they look into. Similarly, actually, all the balance sheets also, when you look at the business balance sheets, any corporate, any this thing, they should not be having too much of debt on their balance sheet. So if that is not, but of course, like there is also something called debt leveraging. So where if you raise debts, and then if you are the cost of your debt is actually much lesser when compared to the returns that your business is providing, then that is actually a good debt to have. So you can always leverage your debt. But if your cost of debt is higher than your business returns, then I think you are in a wrong thing. So similarly, if your GDP is not growing very rapidly, and then if your debt is growing rapidly, then it is in the same kind of a thing. So your sovereign rating will be going south, and then actually people, the foreign direct investors and other people will not be interested in giving any loans to kind of borrowing funds. Actually, when the government is looking at borrowing funds, then the parties will not be interested in kind of giving funds to the government, right? So typically what happens is that a government basically will have to provide direct or indirect job creations, job opportunities to its citizens. So direct is in terms of its own public sector institutions that it has got, and infrastructural spends and so many other things. And there are so many government run institutions, so whereby there are plenty of people actually who are engaged in that in those activities. So they if those institutions are running well, then, and if the spending by the government is pretty good, then it basically tries to give employment opportunities to a lot of the government sector employees. The other sector is the private sector, where the government also has to provide a conducive environment for businesses to thrive. So it has to provide an ecosystem, it has to provide the necessary infrastructure in terms of the physical infrastructure, the connectivities, the kind of telecom infrastructure, and the digitizations, and then the kind of banking sectors, because the funding is something which is very important for the businesses. So the ease of funding, the ease of there should be less of red tapeism, and also in terms of ease of conducting business. If all of these kinds of things are conducive, and if MSMEs and startups and corporates and everybody are able to run their businesses very smoothly without having any hindrance, without, and also in terms of law and order, in terms of providing justice, in terms of providing the necessary legal framework for organizations to thrive, businesses to thrive. So these are all something which a company, a kind of government will have to provide. So if they can actually provide these kind of setup, okay, so whereby the companies can actually run their businesses, and then they can employ the citizens, and then they can actually provide them job opportunities, and then they also provide them the salaries, and then they get the disposable income. They have money availability in their hands, and then they have good spending potential, and then it goes into the same kind of the cycle of economy, right? So the government actually will have, these are all the primary responsibility of the government. So not looking at, so if they are able to take care of all these kinds of things, right? Then the roti kapda makan will automatically follow. And people actually, if they're able to engage people into their demographic dividend, so if they're able to have a huge amount of citizens actually who are available, who are in a working class, and if they're able to provide opportunities of for them to get involved in businesses or employments and whatever, so they will be able to take care of themselves. And in each and every citizen, if that person is able to take care of himself, herself, and along with that her and his families, then that is exactly what the government is looking for. So not necessarily looking at it from the welfare scheme. Of course, the in all the countries will also have to try and look at the economically weaker sections and provide them the necessary kind of the backups in terms of the academic upliftment, and then the financial upliftment and social upliftment and the medical upliftment and all these kinds of provisioning that they have to provide, so that the economic weaker sections also will be able to coexist along with the other sectors. And the primary kind of idea of any government should be, how do we slowly eliminate the number of people from the economic weaker sections and move them from that section into an emerging section where they actually kind of become a little more kind of self-sufficient, or their sustainability starts increasing. So if they're able to get into that side of the quadrant, that is exactly what the government should be looking for, and not looking per se into what are the guarantees that I can provide, what are all the welfare schemes, and what are all the revenues that we can provide, and all those things. Because once you start looking at this kind of things, then you are actually going in a regressive approach. So it is not a progressive approach, it is a regressive, because all these things is going to cost a lot of money to the exchequer, and then that will again actually will result in an increase of debt, and that increase of debt will result in increase of interest payments for the next year, and then the debt to GDP ratio might also start kicking in, and then it might start going north. And if all of these things happen, then actually it might have an impact on the economy, on the GDP, all those kind of things, and also on the capital markets, and also on the the FDIs and FIIs and all these things, right? So my take is that actually, like any corporate, any business, any MSME, any startup, is their primary focus should be on the top line, bottom line, the revenues and the profits. So if they're able to focus upon that, then the other things like the CSR initiative, and then the company climate, and then the company culture, and providing a very good environment for the employees to work in the company, and then the best of the quality, and all the other things, and the CSR and everything, whatever that they can do, all of this comes later. In the similar way, for a country to thrive, for a country to keep moving into the next gear, the ruling party will have to look at, how do I ensure that our economy is improving. Number one, economy is improving. The GDP is rising, kind of quarter on quarter, year on year. The forex reserves are increasing. The inflation is maintained at a very kind of considerable level that the central bank is happy with. And then how do we make the business, the ease of making business, how do we provide the stakeholders that kind of a facility? And then number six is, how do we provide the best of the law and order, and then the justice that in the system to provide such kind of a thing. And then also the other fundamentals in terms of the debt, how much is the debt, and how much is the debt to GDP ratio, and how much is the fiscal deficit, the kind of difference between the revenue and the expenditure, and also the current account deficit, the difference between the export and the import. and how much is the the kind of how much what do you call how much money that they are able to government is able to pump into the economy year on year, and also how much investments that the private sector is also able to bring in into the system, and how the FDIs and the DIIs actually look at the capital markets, and are they interested in the capital markets? Do they also want to invest money over here because they think that this is a very good kind of like park their funds, because it is a good destination where it gives you the best returns for their money. So these are all the kind of things what they have to be focused on, and not necessarily on the welfare schemes and other things. And so those things actually, if you provide instead of providing roti kapda makan, if you provide the kind of a sadak bijli pani, as at one point of time in a Vajpayee ji had mentioned, so that automatically will help in giving everybody the roti kapda makans. Okay, so you don't actually look at it from the reverse way. You don't have to look at how much money am I going to put into the hands of every citizen. Don't have to look at it that way. You have to look at how do we provide a conducive environment for everybody to make money on their own. Because actually, please remember that if you try to give money directly to somebody, you are actually trying to make that person a little guilty that actually you are that person is has to kind of look up to you every time actually when this thing. But on the other hand, actually you are trying to make that person a little more kind of self-centered, little more with a self-esteem, because the person is able to actually take care of himself or herself by by he is able to sustain himself by doing something or the other, right? So that is exactly my point that I was thinking about. So I'm sure that actually most of the economists and most of the advisors to the governments and to the parties, everyone should talk about, and also the babus actually who really run the show. So they should be kind of like pushing the government, the party which is in power, to focus upon all the primary goals that which they have to get into, and not necessarily onto the welfare schemes. Right? So that was my point. Thank you very much for listening.